It's time for the Multifamily Network Podcast. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Let's start the party.
Welcome to the Multifamily Network, the #1 platform for the multifamily industry's hottest and trending topics. I'm your host, Matt Pasalacqua. Let's dive in and get this party started.
There he is.
Yeah, woohoo!
Sorry about that. I've never been accused of being camera shy. That is funny. As a matter of fact, I've been
definitely
such a
not
dick.
camera
I've
shy.
yelled at people who showed up to calls and been like, "Yeah, I'm not doing video." I'm like, "What are we doing? Half a conference call here? Like, what we're not. You're not. You decided that. Oh well. I mean, imagine if you were in person and you walked in and you're like, guys, I'm gonna be outside the room and you can hear my voice through the wall. I mean, what is that shit? Anyways, so I'm here.
That is hilarious.
I'm sorry about that. Technical difficulties.
Hey, no worries.
good, bro.
You know what? Did you guys ever see? It's an older video now, but did you ever see that conference call in real life skit on YouTube where that guy's talking, you can't hear him. He's like, "Sorry, I was on mute," and then one guy's talking, all of a sudden he's outside the room, and "Oh, sorry, I lost connection." Oh, it's hilarious. If you haven't
that's
seen
the
it,
thing. It's like, and when you do an international, that's like a thing. Like they're like, yeah, you don't have to see me. We don't have to see each other. It's like, why not? Like 90% of communication is visual, and you guys are just, I just want to be voice in the box today. Like, bullshit. Come on, bro.
I'm an old dog when it comes to that too, because I'm constantly.
Don't do
I
it.
love technology. I love that we're able to do this. I say it all the time. No one had to buy an airplane ticket to go and have this conversation. I think that's phenomenal, right? But boy, oh boy, do I believe it's just my opinion, and I know and I understand it's not my pocketbook when I'm paying for employees' travel all the time. I understand that, but I just feel we've really lost that personal connection, which is why I believe, Todd, I know you're like that. You and I are at conferences all the time, and we're doing business. This matters. It absolutely does. But with that opportunity, you get to sit down with someone, actually face to face, have that sandwich, that drink, that coffee, that conversation. It's huge, right? Anyway, I don't want, we had a podcast about that, but Todd, I know you agree with me.
Oh yeah. The last time I saw you was in Vegas, and you're standing on the table, man.
Yeah.
That's another show.
That's another show. Well, hey, look, y'all, I really appreciate you being on. We're going to dive right in, but look, this is going to be a very interesting topic of conversation today, and it stemmed from some internal conversation we're having on our side, and we wanted to get the opinions based on the results of some polls and everything else from some industry experts like yourself. But before we do that, Todd, I've known you for a long time. Jeff, I'm just getting acquainted. If we can just circle the wagons and just, if you guys can give me a little bit of intro into yourself, and that help both Keith and I tremendously. Todd, why don't you go first?
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me on. 35-year veteran telecom industry, started back in '89, worked mostly for the large cable MSOs, spent 20 years running multifamily sales for one of the large cable operators, Charter Spectrum, and made the leap over to Dojo Networks about 3 years ago. I think I'm coming up on my 3-year anniversary. So I love technology. I love telecom and multifamily. So it's been a kind of a great mixture of all of those things all put together, and the cake gets made. So there you go.
Awesome. And Jeff, you know what? I haven't had much time to get acquainted with you, but I can tell you, I think you and I are going to be long friends. I just have a feeling. But just give me a quick intro. I know Keith knows you real well, but I'd love to get to know you better, my man.
Well, I'm a lot younger than Todd is. I've only been in the industry for
So is a lot of people, Jeff.
It's funny. I've been in the industry forever, and so I started with a competitive local exchange carrier that got bought by AT&T. And these are all acronyms that make no more sense, but you guys might remember the CLEX and all that stuff. But then, so then I hopped over to the vendor side not too far after that merger, and I've been supplying technology to telephony, cable companies, and ISPs and all that. And proud partner with Blueport. Blueport is an incredible company, really awesome company, some really cool founders. And so as an example, when the opportunity came up with Technity, I wanted to try and do something different for equipment manufacturing for the telco and cable space. And what we've been doing is we've been trying to sort of collapse the big iron moving parts for contract manufacturing for the industry. And we've had some success the past couple of years. It's been great. Near and dear to my heart, though, is this one of these topics. It's my origins are in a competitive local exchange carrier. My whole career has blossomed as a result of sort of the things that happened and for that in that market. And I think our telephony operators, especially the smaller ones, are really true heartland of America, community. They have focus on their community. So thanks guys for putting this call together or the show together, because I think it's a great topic, and it's a good opportunity to catch up with you guys. So I have a lot of respect for everyone on this call.
I think a good point of clarification needs to be made, though. When Jeff says that Blueport has cool founders, he's in fact talking about Gail and Sherry, not Ed and Dave. I think that's worth pointing out.
Draw the distinction there. That's very important.
You're right. That says more about me than it does about them, right? That I thought they were cool.
And you guys will notice that we'll edit this out to make you guys look much.
Don't
more
edit
cool than Keith
anything.
and I.
I mean, come on.
So-
That's how people show up for the bloopers.
Exactly.
Come on,
Really
let's
in
keep them
charge.
in there. Who cares? So
Uh,
we'll make all the career limiting comments we can on this show.
That's
How about
right.
that?
That's right.
Right.
And, yeah, especially mine and Keith's which side of the street do we walk on and how we get on and off an elevator conversation from the last show, which seemed to be the only thing people cared about when they tuned in, which was funny, but whatever. That's fine. That's fine. We're okay with that as long as people are entertained. So hey, listen, kind of diving into the topic and why we are here, and I got excited about it after Jeff spoke about being excited about the topic. So now I'm even more amped up. But really what it is, here's how it started. We had a conversation internally. I wouldn't even say internally. I think we were just at Optech. Keith
Was
and I,
alcohol involved?
I can neither admit nor
Cigars?
deny.
Cigars?
Oh, definitely cigars were involved. Absolutely. So
You're in
absolutely
Vegas,
some
so
cigars.
you just leave it at that, right?
Whiskey and cigars may have been involved, but we're sitting around with a couple other partners, people in the industry, and as we know, we've been at these things. What's thrown around loosely, I think we all agree, and I'm not going to get into the dangers or opinion of it yet, but topic or statement that's constantly made is internet as a utility, or internet is a utility, or internet is like a utility, or Wi-Fi, the fourth utility, or this, the fourth or fifth utility, right? So anyways, I kind of threw that up there, but really it just spun off a honest conversation of, hey, look, internet's really a commodity, is it not? And then there was some back and forth on that. Is it dangerous to keep referring to internet as a utility? And that was the question that was bare to ask, right? So what we did, we said, hey, look, let's start a poll. And we released a poll out into the world. And the poll asked two questions. Is it dangerous to keep referring to internet, not Wi-Fi, not anything else, but the internet as a utility? And the second option in that poll was, no, I believe internet should be a utility. Two simple questions. We want it to be a very simple poll. We released it on LinkedIn and a few other different networks, and it was just those questions. Yeah, we just wanted to keep it just like that. We just wanted to keep it very simple. And what was astonishing, and this is what's kicked off this whole show and topic, and why we invited a couple industry pros like yourself on, is because 73% of all people who answered that poll, after it was shared by myself, by Keith, a few other people, and it went out into their networks, and it came back and collected a conglomerate of information, was 73% of the people who answered that poll said internet should absolutely be a utility. And what was more taken back from Keith and I's position was a lot of the people who answered that were in the industry. Now they're now when I say in the industry, they're connected to it, meaning their business runs on the internet being a thing, right? Whether they're a supplier, a distributor, a vendor, an actual backhaul owner of an infrastructure that sells circuits or sells residential folks. Maybe they only operate in multifamily. Didn't matter. These were majority of these folks were internet folks. Were there some that weren't internet folks? Absolutely, right? We're connected with other people in the industry as well, or outside the industry within our networks. But it was very interesting that only 27% of people said, especially ones in the industry, no, yes, I believe it's dangerous to refer to internet as a utility. Now I'll pause there, right? So that's why we're here. We had some internal conversation. We were scratching our heads. We ran the poll twice. Meaning I extended the time the poll was operational, able to be answered, right? Just because we thought that might be a hiccup. So we let it run for, I think, like 14 days, right? It was like a 14-day poll. And it was holding tight at 71, 72%, but final numbers were 73%. Very, very interesting. I'll pause there. Keith, do you have anything to add about our conversation and why we wanted to have some excellent folks like Jeff or Todd on? I'll pause there.
No, I just thought it would be fun to talk it out and see what everybody's perspective on the situation is.
Yeah, and more ideally from folks in the industry, right?
Right.
Let's dive in. I mean, I can't think of anybody that's more involved on panels, on professional media like LinkedIn and someone that's not to stroke your ego here, Todd, but you're very active, you're very engaged in the industry, and I think when you talk, people listen.
All you want.
Well, I think when you talk, people listen. You like to tell a good story, and when I say story, not BS, but you know what you're doing, right? You're a trusted expert in the industry, and I think it would be great to why don't we kick things off with you? We just want to get your opinion on it. Let's start with, why do we believe that started to be mentioned in the first place? Where did that come from? What are your thoughts?
Well, having a telecom background, I've been doing this for 35 years. And I've seen the industry go from 20 channels of cable TV and the invention of CNN and all the networks to, now we're going to offer phone service. And, now this internet thing has been invented and now we're going to offer internet service. So coming from a background of being in the industry and seeing these services develop from the very beginning, and not just as a consumer, but as a provider of those services, I think I have a unique perspective on that, and the laws and all the regulation that has come along over my 30 plus years. I think it'd be interesting to understand the poll if it was owners primarily who were saying yes or no, or was it the providers who were saying yes or no? Because at the end of the day, I think you're going to have two different viewpoints. You're going to have the providers like us, like Dojo Networks, and their perspective and their answer. But then you're also going to have the customers that we serve, which are the owners and the developers from a managed Wi-Fi standpoint. But more importantly, it really is the resident that is benefiting from all of this, or maybe not benefiting if the provider is falling down and not providing the level of service that they should be. I think it's taken that form or that road because first you had cable, then you had internet, and then you had phone and internet service. And those services just kind of keep getting added on, and it gets lumped into all of that. You had the single play and then the triple play from the cable MSOs and the operators. And then everybody started getting into that business. You saw AT&T and Verizon getting into the video business and the internet business. So everybody becomes a part of that. And then Wall Street is really set on numbers and how many video subscribers are you adding? How many internet subscribers are you adding? How many phone subscribers are you adding? So I'll pause there, but I think that's been kind of the catalyst. I'm not saying that's the reason why, and good or bad, that it should be called a utility or not. I think we'll get into that discussion, and I know Keith and Jeff will have their own perspective, but I think that's how it got started.
So let me ask you real quick, Todd. You said it would be interesting to see who answered that poll how, right? From a provider versus an owner. What would you expect? How would you expect an owner of an apartment community to view that? You think they would be on the side of it being a utility or no?
Probably not a utility. And the reason being, at the end of the day, I don't know if the owner so much really cares about the utilities. And, I don't know if people can see the people listening can't see the air quotes I'm making, because, the owners really care about the resident and the resident experience. Not to, I'll steal a line from Jeff. He was a guest on a podcast that I used to do years ago. And he said that the best internet, remember this, Jeff?
Yeah.
You said the best internet is the kind you don't need to think about. Yeah. And that's true, because at the end of the day, who cares really, where it's coming from and how it's coming, so much as it better just work when I flip the switch. When you leave the house and you jump on your data, and I'm talking about with your cell phone itself, you're on your internet, but then you leave the home, you leave your apartment, whatever, and you jump on your data, you go do your errands, you come back. Maybe you stopped at Starbucks and you jumped on their internet, but you go back home and you get back on the internet. Nobody checks to see, oh, geez, am I back on my internet? It just automatically connects, right? It's just something that we're just conditioned to not really think about. Only when it's not working. That's when you start to think about it and you care the most about it. So I think that is why it has become this utility. We use it. Dojo networks use it. We call it the most important utility. But I think that's why. So owners probably not so much, but providers like us probably more so are saying yes.
Interesting. Okay, Jeff, let's kick it over to you, because I'm, just want to hear from you guys, right? I mean, we were scratching our heads about this whole thing. So again, kind of the same questions, with knowing 73% of the people that answered the poll in the industry, for the most part, we're in the industry, voted that it should be utility. Why do you think that is? Do you think they're answering it from a place of confidence? Do they answer just quickly, not thinking about it? Hell, I don't want to, you tell me. We got our own opinions about it, but we want to hear from you guys.
Sure. So I'd say the folks are just, like Todd said, are kind of set up to think of it as a utility. It's kind of fallen into the commercial form of it's something I have to pay for every month. And it seems to coincide with this idea of these are the things that a really important aspect of keeping my home going or keeping my house running is that I got to make sure I support, with either paying a bill or whatever to keep this going for the home. So the term utility can mean different things for different people, and I think that's pretty interesting that Keith is sort of saying, well, this is the slice of people that we asked. And I think that's kind of the purpose of the question. Terms, what terms we use, right. Utility, right. I think is interesting. To me, I think what causes the concern or the fear, not fear, but sort of, wow, this actually is this a thing that would constitute someone having an opinion about, is the idea that if we do decide to take this area of the technology and lump it into, power and water and all these things, phone, if we take this and lump it into that, well, what does it mean to us as the suppliers, right? You have the service suppliers, you have the people who make the equipment for it. What does that mean? And I think a lot of us, at least the ones, I don't know, that I would consider to be mindset, have the same mind share, find it pretty concerning. Like, well, wait, why do you want to take such an incredible technology and now lump it into an area of, sort of, I'll say in some instances dusty, or, non, as far as the technology advancement, not really, going to the moon in regards to how the technology is moving forward. Why would you take something that seems limitless and forever and lump it into these sort of mundane, slower moving areas?
Interesting. Can I step on you just real quick, because I love what you just said. Could you unpack that portion of it a little bit about it, where you're talking about, limitless and endless, and then putting it into this dusty type of process and system? Can you explain to us, or to me, if you can draw it in crayon for me, I'd love it, what that means? Are you talking about stifling innovation? Are you talking about?
No,
I
didn't do a good job of it, but I would say I'm thinking of the mindset of when we use the word utility, right? So, you can find utility in anything, right? So when you find the utility is really you're pulling the value out of it. But when we say a utility, it's only when that utility has specific obligation to it, that it seems to lose some of the momentum and lose some of the gamemanship or alpha. I love the alpha.
Yeah.
Loses some of the alpha on the basis of having to bring it back to, sort of a regulatory area, and apply this sort of level of virtue onto it, which is just exhausting to me. Like, why, you're going to now have some virtue and entitlement in regards to this particular technology. And every time that we've done it, it's not netted better. Like, it doesn't seem like it's netted better. So I'm wondering, we certainly don't want to stifle any of the innovation, but if we go ahead and sort of change the whole market aspect of it to being more of a regulatory controlled area of technology, I think it's an absolute disaster. I don't think it should be done. And, is there a better way to do it than to try and, bridle it with, a lot of regulatory. And the last thing I'll close with that comment, based on your question, is, if you look at the market parameters of it, Todd and I, and I won't speak for Matt and Keith, but Todd and I have been doing it for long enough to see market events that really benefited and fostered. It wasn't perfect, but we've seen markets really take off, explode, and do things that were for the betterment of the technology. And it didn't have that virtue and that clamping of, sort of commercial mechanizations that sort of tamp it down. Didn't really have those things, and it really benefited humanity. So I think it's a balance, and I don't think people are really, operating from that area of, they're operating more from a mindness. The purse strings right now, if you look at all the money that's in all the broadband bill growth right now, a ton of it is coming from grants and government issued loans or anything like that. And my mindset or makeup is just so different from that. That has to do with, again, sort of the virtuous purse strings or virtuous clamping of that.
40 plus $billion across the United States. I mean, if we look at the last sponsor for Broadband Community Summit, that was Broadband Money, right? Broadband.money. Those guys are doing a lot of work out there with the BEAD funding and everything else. And And I spent the last outfit I was with, I spent a lot of time in with CASF grants, ARPA grants, prepping for BEAD funding, the first rounds, et cetera, et cetera. And it's very interesting. And I could talk that. That might be a separate topic of conversation later, but there's still some holes in that, right? I spoke at Connected America last year. It's coming up again here in March, but last March, I believe it was Irving, Texas. And, the Fiber Broadband Association was there, and there's a lot of different panels speaking about that BEAD funding. And to tie it back into what we're seeing with this, using it as a utility thing, one of the examples that was given at the presentation, I thought it was very crafty, but I did have some questions. I thought it was very crafty and a very good example. And they compared the expansion of electricity back in the late 20s and early 30s and the government funding that was going on with that. Well, we're seeing the same thing with BEAD today. But one of the questions that I had was, hey, how many power companies were there in 1928 and 1931 and 1932? How many were there? Not many. Right? Not really, right? So, and they were trying to refer it to and I asked, isn't there danger in that? And referring it, we've got 15,000 CLECs, registered across the United States. We've got, roughly 3,000 quote unquote internet service providers, and the ones that branch off from there as local, Matt's Bait and Tackle Internet Company, et cetera, et cetera. What does that do?
Those guys are great, by the way. Yeah, they should be a sponsor of your show.
They should absolutely. I'll talk to the guy. I know the owner. He's cheap, but look, I mean, when we get down to it, and then the other question I had for the folks in the room that were heading up these conversations was, at what, and this is before I really started diving into and getting into the grant stuff, but there's a lot of questions and a lot of, I don't dare say regulatory, or basically how much control are you willing to give up for the money? And then on top of that, and this is where I'll pause because again, I can nerd out on this with playing in this. The time I played in this a little bit was, even though they're giving out billions of dollars, believe it or not, it's not enough, right? It's my plant exists here. It's awesome. You're willing to pay $22 per home to go that way, but it's $18,000 per home, right? So, anyways, I digress. But to your point, Jeff, when we're attaching that value, that virtue to and things like that, I think the intention for things like the BEAD funding and getting it out there and having this mandatory access type stuff that would potentially lead to it, this open access stuff and all what those companies are doing, how much regulatory things are going to be attached to it, how much who's actually controlling it, who's going to have the final say, and then what happens to the 15,000 providers across the United States that quote unquote 15,000 CLECs or anybody else operating in the space that has some form of stake in the internet game, right? And again, I know that number can be divided any other way, so nobody crucify me for the 15,000 number, but
I think we need to use the word antiquated instead of dusty, though, Jeff, if we could. It just sounds.
Yeah, of course. I mean, my choice of words probably aren't the most sensitive. So, but I mean, the thing that I would say is that for the topic, I think that's helpful is, in the end, if to Matt he just I think really got there was, even if that is the case, right? In the end, you have to believe that the technology is, and I think we could all geek out on it and all have our own perspectives about the technology, but more money, you can't put enough money into it, actually. And so if we're at this sort of, maybe it all depends on perspective. If you look at sort of the granting and the fact it is actually more money put into the technology, put in to help folks get it, it's not still enough. So there's a whole nother chapter, I think, to be written as a result of kind of what we're going through right now. And, shameless plug, I'll go ahead and say, companies like Blueport and Dojo are really still laser focused on achieving that internet experience that is, liberating and allows people to really do it. And in your world, enhancing, real estate value and doing all these good things. And I don't see it slowing down whether or not internet's a utility or not. I see you guys cooking. Hopefully we're supplying you with gear to make that happen. But, that's
an interesting point. That's an interesting point, and segue, and I'll explain here. And what I'm getting to is internet. When we talk about internet as utility, and whether or not it's dangerous or not, let's pretend it is. Internet's a utility tomorrow, okay? Right? And Keith, I'll actually kind of toss this over to you because I think you could probably come up with a
And
better
who's that?
example.
Is it the utility cop just said, let it be said?
Yeah, like we're waving a magic wand, maybe a good one, maybe it's
I
an
love
evil
that wand.
I don't know. That wand is bam, internet's utility tomorrow. They figured it out. Two conglomerates bought every single ISP out there. It's one company providing it, two companies maybe, which probably would happen. We can get into that argument here in a minute, or discussion here in a minute. Talk about stomping on the little guy. But internet's a utility. They figured it out. Maybe everybody's providing it, right? It's utility. It's mandatory to bring to a home, etc. When people are building, blah, 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 right? Because we haven't even defined what utility is yet, but it's a utility. Now, is it internet the utility, the raw utility? Keith, you could why don't you take this one, Keith? Because I know this, you like this point, and I think you could drive it home a little bit better than I am. Go ahead.
Hold on, though. I want to back up real quick. I want to back
up. I like
up.
the magic wand game. Fine.
No, fine. That's fine. Let's back up in our conversation, though. It's a utility. Fantastic. I think I heard from Matt and Jeff that the largest winner of it becoming a utility is the provider, right? Is that what y'all were getting at with the money and the B funding?
No, I think so. Go ahead.
All right, so then let me pose the question.
I would think it's the end user, hopefully.
Let me pose it to everybody real quick. Who's the biggest winner when internet becomes a utility?
I think it's the resident, personally, myself, because, and sometimes you got to be careful what you wish for, because right now, internet really isn't regulated like phone service or electric is. And when you think about utilities, you do think about regulation. Consumption is tracked. You got net neutrality rules. You do have the FCC that is, they have their hands in it. But right now, it's not as heavily regulated. So be careful what you wish for, because if you really want to keep pushing it at a utility, and I'm going to go on the record to say that I think it is. It's not, should it be, but it is. I think regulation can be a good thing as long as, we're talking about all this funding is there. But at the end of the day, the resident, the end user, whether it's a homeowner or a resident in multifamily, has to be the one that benefits from all of this. Whether it's
but the question isn't who has to be. The question is who's gonna be. Right?
Well, we have to, I think, make sure that the providers benefit in the sense that they're there to be able to be profitable enough to bring services to the people, for talking affordable right now, to be able to serve those under rural developed areas. They have to be able to be profitable in order to do that. But at the same time, it really comes down to the resident being able to benefit from that, and not, because when you think about it, you're talking about back in the 20s when there were only maybe a couple, 2 or 3 electric companies. Think of all the people who didn't have electric service or water service, and you had to get out to that. Right now, I think internet, when you talk about that rural, that digital divide, is akin to kind of that, early 1900s, where there's still a lot of rural places that don't have internet service. They have lights, they have running water, but they don't have internet service, and I think that's kind of sad.
So Jeff, who's the biggest beneficiary of becoming a utility?
Well, so I'm going to split a hair and say a regulated utility. If it's a regulated utility, it's the people doing the regulation that are going to benefit the most. They do nothing. They all they do is on the basis of again, virtue, coming back virtuously, they're going to go ahead and control. And their only reason why they would do it is on the basis of the power that they get as a result of having that position. They're completely useless otherwise, right? So I think that those, you said the most, there's definitely benefit as a result of other things that when that happens and those things occur, that, as Todd's really focused, I think, appropriately, and maybe a nicer guy than me, but he's focused on the resident and saying
I
that
think
the
there's any
resident is
doubt
the
he's a
yourself
nicer guy
short.
than you, Jeff.
I mean, maybe he's more dreamy than I am, but I don't know. I don't think the folks that end up doing the regulation end up concerned as much with the resident as they are on their ability and power of sort of regulating it. I don't think that
I don't think that what you said takes away from being concerned for the resident at all, Jeff. I think that you're trying to protect the quality of the service and the dare I say the infrastructure that's out there, right? To make sure it's put together well, right? By removing any type of regulatory utility, effort that might be a little useless, stifling whatever it's going to stifle. And maybe I'm putting it a little too blunt, or maybe I'm off track, but I think what you're saying is absolutely looking out for the end user, right?
Yes. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
That's where I'm saying, in the end, if you're going to go ahead and what really makes things, make sure that the resident has the best available technology for their domicile or whatever, is competition. I mean, that by far makes it the most possible. You'll get the best possible only when you can either win or lose a customer. When you can win or lose a customer, the customer becomes king. It becomes the rules of the game. You win or lose based on how many customers you get. And you know what? Customers can vote with their dollars. They can vote with what they ultimately select as far as what they want in options. The problem is that, and it's interesting, I think it's definitely a deeper show. I mean, the Universal Service Fund, you have this new technology, right? So you have this new technology get wheeled in, and the proliferation or the acceptance of it benefits collectively. Like, it benefits collectively, this particular technology. So we should go back and look at and see what people have done. The Universal Service Fund was built so that, in Paducah, whatever, I don't mean to call out Paducah. I just think it's an interesting small town name. But you take Paducah and you say, okay, they don't have the facility or they don't have the infrastructure to receive long distance phone calls. The long distance phone companies got together and said, you know what, let's do a Universal Service Fund and make it so that they can terminate those long distance calls. So to me, that was like industry coming up with a way to sponsor the proliferation that was absent of virtue. And what you get as a result of that is you get something that is better than what is deemed, based on, again, on more subjective power type things, on how people should have the utility. I mean, and also, where's the sense of entitlement? I mean, it's like, is it coming from these, communities that are saying, I demand broadband. I should be having broadband here. I'm riding on my horse through the fields, and I'm feeling less than because I don't have broadband.
Well, I think
I
that
don't
brings
necessarily
up,
think that's. I think it's the politicians that kind of say,
Yep,
you
yep.
need to have broadband. You should have broadband. And it's sort of like, okay, you know what? The most incredible thing to sort of the proliferation of the electricity and that particular technology was cooperatives. Cooperatives are amazing. There's so many cooperatives out there in the country that figured out, you know what? This is going to benefit our it's a localized effort to sort of benefit and contribute to the community. And they do these cooperatives, and they did it with electricity. And guess what?
Mhm.
They're doing it now for broadband. And why are they doing it for broadband? Because it's less regular. I have my own opinions as to why.
No, I think it's great. Go ahead, Keith.
No,
Well,
I'm just saying. I just think it's. I think it's again. It's something that the self-servingly, I believe that the regulation it could be harming more than it can help, because I think ultimately the innovation in the technology. I'm a technologist, so I believe that that's really where we want to be. That's the field we want to be on, is the way to do it the best, and have the commercial marketplace really ultimately decide, and not have it be decided by somebody sitting in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, historically not great at making decisions in that city. What's the impact to owners and operators if it becomes a utility?
In my opinion, it's again, is it a funded, is it subsidized? Where is that when you say the word utility? Where is the where's the subsidies, and where is the dollars? If it's a utility that is subsidized, then it becomes a whole different thing. If it's a utility now, like I said, it's like people have it in between their phone bill and their a cell phone bill and cable bill and the electricity bill. They have that in the same category. Their car payment, it's the same. So to me, you're always looking to reduce costs, and you're always looking for competition, so that you can do better.
But what's the impact on the owner and operator of the apartment community?
Well, if you go ahead and say that it's a regulated utility, you're going to find owners that are going to advertise, 1 gig, 2 gig, 3 gig, because they always want to enhance their value of their real estate property, and that's attuned to painting the facility or doing all the things that you want to do. You're increasing your value by offering it, and you're going to do it whether it's regulated or not, except for some property owners that won't care, and yes, the folks will suffer as a result of that. To Todd's point.
So let me lob that to you, Todd. What do you see the impact being? It's a utility, magic wand by Matthew. What's the impact to the owner operator of the apartment community?
Yeah, I like what Jeff was saying, and there are, if you go back in time, owners took electric service, for example, or water or gas, and they rolled that into their offering. So we're going to include electric as an incentive or an amenity for you to move in. And then gas and water is a part of that package. Internet service with bulk and managed Wi-Fi is becoming a part of that. And then owners, so the impact to the owner developer is to be able to offer that as an amenity and as a marketing tool, or as a way to get the resident to move into their property and not the one across the street. Because at the end of the day, and trust me, I know this from 20, 30 years working in this industry, is that people, whether you live in a house or you live in an apartment, you have to get your utilities set up when you move into your new home, or you move into, it's transient. You have to get your cable set up. You got to get your internet set up, your phone. Not so much cable anymore because everybody's streaming everything. But the internet is so important. So the benefit to the owner is to be able to take one less thing away from the resident having to deal with, by just incorporating that into the experience that the resident's going to get when they move in.
So are you seeing in the managed Wi-Fi deployments you guys are doing, first of all, you went one step further and you said managed Wi-Fi as the utility, which I think is an even more interesting conversation.
Right, because internet as the raw utility versus Wi-Fi, right?
Right, because
that's where I was going with the magic wand game. Yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
We can unpack that later, and I think we should. But are in the deployments you're seeing, then are most of them rolled into rent, or are you seeing people use that as a technology fee where people are paying a premium for IoT and for managed Wi-Fi?
I think what we're seeing, it's a mixture of you're not seeing it one way or the other. It's a combination of, and I've even seen some owners not even charging for it, or at least they're saying they're not, and they're just using it as a marketing expense, so they can advertise. But to Jeff's point, what he mentioned on earlier, what triggered that was a gig, offering a gig. What we're really starting to see is owners and developers really want a true gig to the unit for every resident, because they're giving them as much speed as possible, or what's available at the time.
Yeah.
What
I
happens with
guess
that?
the reason I asked that question is because there is a limit, and it varies state to state, but there's a limit on how much you're allowed to make on a utility when you provide it.
Yep.
So
Colorado's
I see
really
an
big on
instant
that. Yep.
impact on everybody that's doing it as a technology fee. That's gone. You're going to have to roll it into rent.
Well, there's other, we're seeing other owners where they're paying us for it, but then the resident, they're not automatically charging the resident. The resident is then buying it through the provider or through us. And then the owner's getting compensated that way. So there is ways around that, that we're starting to see a lot of owners do. But at the end of the day, we're not saying one means to recoup that investment from an owner is more prevalent than another, whether it's rent, amenity fee, or just not charging for it at all.
I think that we get into a couple things, right? I think we all agree that we believe the internet is needed. We all want access to it. We don't want anybody standing in the way of us getting it. We believe the internet is the connectivity of things. I'm going to table the Wi-Fi part of it just for a second, but we believe we should have access to it and no one should stand in the way of us getting it, right?
Unless you live on the top of a mountain that's 62 miles away from anywhere that would make human sense for you to have internet at that.
And what I'm getting at, if it goes into a rate, and this is where my brain goes, and maybe I'm off track, and this is why I wanted to get opinions from everybody else. When we talk about regulation, and we talk about, I see when I hear that word, regulatory utility, or calling it a utility, or making it a utility, I think, okay, all the small guys are going away. This is what happens in my brain. All the small guys are going away. We have three main providers across the United States, like we have PG&E, SMUD, and everybody else, right? We have a limit on advancements in technology. We don't have choices when it comes to speed. In fact, the regulatory person sits back and goes, "Nah, you only need 25 megs. You don't need a gig." Nah, we've made that decision on this table here because we're people that were in the business 50 years ago, and we've been elected to regulate this. And I don't think you need any more than 100 meg. Oh, you want a gig? Nah, sorry, you don't need it. You don't need it. Where else are you going to get it? Good luck. All those guys are gone now. These are, anyways, I could do this all day, but that's what I actually see happening with regulatory utility and internet. And then move it back to the Wi-Fi piece, right? If we're considering the Wi-Fi portion as part of the utility, to me, that opens up a whole new can of worms. I can tell you I get a utility bill every single month or every 3 months or so for water. So the way it works here in my town, or maybe that's the trash. I gotta relook. I think water comes every month, right? And it's monitored. How much usage did you use? Is someone going to sit back and go, "Oh, you used 25 megs. Oh, you're using this. Your neighbor's using that." Is there going to be a meter on the side of my house to regulate my broadband, right? Aside from that, I know when I get my water bill, they don't say, "Well, it looks like the water went through the hose, and this much went through the shower head, and this much came through the water dispenser on the fridge." Isn't that what Wi-Fi is? The dispense of the utility that's coming in? I digress. Keith, let me kick it over to you. Like I said, because I'll say that all day, but that's where my mind goes with utility, because Wi-Fi is what you do. If we're calling internet the utility, isn't Wi-Fi what you're doing with that? Just like whether I'm charging my phone, using a electric stove, or running my fridge, that's what I'm doing with the power.
So yeah. Look, you can move to North Carolina where they do charge you separately for what goes in your house and what goes in your yard. It's cheaper to water your grass than it is to water your dishes.
Yeah, don't drink the gray water.
Right, but then in Charlotte, you also get charged a rainwater tax based on the square footage of your home, your roof, because you got, so they'll figure out. Yes,
you're under God's green earth.
Yes, they'll figure out how to charge you for consumption. But I think those are all. I think that's what makes it scary. I think that's why your question was, is it dangerous, right? Not is it right or is it wrong, but is it dangerous? I think that, I don't know. I could go either way, because I think it's one of those things you shouldn't be able to keep people from getting.
Well, right now you can't, because in net neutrality, And for your listeners who don't know, net neutrality it's that the idea that the company providing the internet service is not allowed to throttle your service or control your service. So as an internet provider, we can't, throttle that based off of, somebody's usage, and internet service providers have to be careful about the net neutrality rules that are out there. It doesn't mean that can't change at some point.
Right, but
it
doesn't affect whether or not they have to provide me internet access as a consumer.
Correct.
Right. And that's what I'm saying is I don't think internet, to the extent that you have to provide utilities or you can't keep people from getting it, I like the alignment of internet with a utility. But then when I think about the people that are going to get involved in making the rules for how I get it, I want it nowhere near being a utility because
Right.
You're talking about the group of people with
or a Jeff
the
Dooley.
lowest job performance approval rating in the world is U.S. Congress, right? So,
Yay! Yeah,
let's
amen.
take this group
That's true.
historically hated and this thing historically loved,
Right.
and let's let those guys be in charge of it. And it's like,
It's madness.
My goodness.
Madness.
I don't
agree.
think. If you told me tomorrow Todd Thorpe was going to be elected, I'd be like, okay, I got some confidence. You tell me, Jeff, is going to be, or Keith, cool. But they're not going to come to us.
No.
That's not what's going to happen. Right? I would turn it down. You don't want me up there. I did just, but
I don't want y'all
They
following
can let
people
me
from
host the
college and
podcast.
putting them on CNN.
you know what I mean? Well, hey, look, listen, to kind of bring this home a little bit. Is really this. Do we believe we are actually on the cut? Because the poll really did, raise some hairs, right? I think that we've landed on a couple things. You guys tell me if I'm wrong. We don't believe the internet should be kept from anybody. We don't believe it shouldn't be subsidized as long as.
But even on that comment, like, who is it kept from? I don't understand that. That's the part.
You're absolutely right, and that was yes. No, go ahead, please go
Well,
ahead.
no, I'm just like, how is it kept from anyone? It's just this. It's again going back to that entitlement. Shelf the entitlement and go for I'll just kind of, because I follow it because it has a direct correlation to our business. Is as more money's good, right? There's better money than others in regards to the industry, and one of the things that happened, that I think is interesting is, when you put decisions on the basis of virtue, or sort of your reasonings are on the basis of entitlement, like people shouldn't be kept. Like, it's like, I'm just trying to kind of go with that you find that once you make that rule, you have to make another rule.
Yes,
and then you have to make another rule, and then
that's
you have
exactly
to
where I was
keep on
going with
making
that.
more
Yep.
and more rules. And I'll just give it an example. One of the things that I think is just absolutely outrageous and frustrating. I'm an old goat. I've been around forever, and I've watched as a consumer, but also as a participant in the industry, how we consume has changed wildly. It's gone from a TV antenna up on top of everybody's home to a cable that eventually came in. Now it went back to, some type of cellular or some type of thing, and then it comes back to a cable or a wire, as in fiber optics, right? So you have spectrum, and the rules now that have come as a result of sort of like the money, that the rules that come with the money.
Yep.
They made a decision that they weren't going to honor. So we talk about it because I think we're reasonable, cool guys. We're talking about, hey, everyone should get a gig. Everyone deserves a gig. Heck yeah, you at least deserve a gig. If you're not getting a gig, I will post my number at the end of the show, and we'll try and figure that out for you. But they came back and they said to a lot of these operators, okay, we're going to give you this grant, and by the way, you win it. You won that grant, and by the way, in order to deliver that service, you have to use fiber.
Yep. Or you have to have a
me,
price lock for 5 years.
And that's where Keith came in, and Keith said, you know what? Do we really want these dudes? No, we don't want the people who are the most removed, the one that can gain the most from the power that they're going to get to make the decision. You make that decision, and that is now outside of it being very dumb because of the technology, not understanding the technology, being an economically ridiculous thing that makes absolutely no sense. You've also delayed the service, and you've delayed ultimately what that customer, that end user is going to get by an immense amount by making one rule as a result of giving money, right? So to me, it would be, if we had faith in our leadership or Congress, maybe it would be a different tune. But we are in the middle of this right now, and it's not going well. There's not going to be anyone who says, you know what, BEAD is awesome, man. Wow, you're going to get reelected on that one. There's nobody doing that. It's not happening.
And to piggyback on your point, and that's absolutely where I was going with it. There's nothing standing in people's way of getting it today, right? I think because where I was going with that is, I think the problem why everyone's either afraid to call it a utility or afraid to say, hey, no, it's dangerous to call it a utility. Because I think there might be a fear, right, from a virtue position that if I stand on a podium or I stand in front of a group and I say, I don't believe internet should be a utility, it sounds like I'm trying to keep something from somebody. And I think that part of that we're afraid of sounding like that, when what we need to be doing is having more conversations like this. And listen, I'm at the least philosophical guy out there, like being philosophical here, but I really believe that we really need to circle the wagons, have more conversations like this, and help people understand why it's more valuable as a commodity, or more valuable the way we've been doing it, to the benefit of the end user, in my opinion. Right.
I mean, a real terrific, just to build on that point just a little bit, is to say, when the power and electricity were happening, you had these co-ops, blossom, and they're making decisions on alternative current and direct current, right? And they are able to make a decision based on what was going to serve their community, right? So they're the ones that are, doing the numbers, figuring the things out, because they are obligated to that cooperative to make a good decision, to make a decision that's important. And so if, the way that I look at it now, the way that things have sort of happened is, if that had happened, what they're doing now, we could have a challenge with our power. Like our power, even though I think it suffers in some degree, we wouldn't be as far along if we had sort of that influence and that regulatory step in during that blossoming of that particular technology. And that, to me, is what you do not want to, in my opinion, mess with, because it nets better for the user and the consumer, but also it's fragile. It's like, okay, you've completely changed the industry very narrowly on the basis of rules and regulations that you've put in there. When did you have to? And did you really do it as the consumer? Did you have the best interest of the consumer in mind at the time? Or were you looking for, a campaign talking point or whatever? And I'm sorry, but that happens. They're doing it.
Does. And one more point to the nobody keeping it from you thing. I can tell you, coming from the ISP side, and Jeff, Todd, I know you'll appreciate this too, because you work for some of the larger conglomerates as well that actually own the backhaul infrastructure. I'm not talking about being an internet company where I'm buying circuits and stuff. We're actually building it, right? There is not a actual backhaul infrastructure company out there. Doesn't matter what they're using, millimeter wave technology, actual fiber in the ground, doesn't matter. That looks at a map of the United States. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not a provider out there that looks and goes, I really hope I don't get new subscribers today. I really hope I don't grow. That little community over there, you know what? I could serve it, but nah, I ain't going to. There's not a business owner in the world, a CEO, a board of directors, a private venture group that owns a bunch of brands and ISPs that's sitting back and going, I really hope that I could be non-virtuous and just not serve people today. And I'm just going to sit back with my cigar and go, business is good the way it is. Let's not grow. I'm telling you right now, I work directly for ISPs that were going after grant funding and everything else, and we were chomping at the bit. It does not always work out to get the funding. People really need to realize that. And I can tell you, there wasn't a quarterly meeting that went by, being as part of the senior leaderships on that team on that side, going, growth strategies, we don't want to grow. Let's not serve other communities. It all comes down to cost, whether
It
the
does.
government's paying for it or not. It comes to, Todd, go ahead. Sorry. I get
No, I was just
passionate
gonna
on that
say,
piece of it.
I think the intentions sometimes are noble, but then the execution falls flat. Like the
Yeah.
ACP program started out to
Yes,
be really
yes.
good, but then there's so many regulations and paperwork and red tape that you have to do in order to comply that at the end of the day, you're just like, well, forget it. If I got to
Right.
do all of this, it's just not worth it. And I'm talking about on the provider side.
Yes,
That, all
yes.
of this processing and the bill, not to mention, making the resident have to fill out certain paperwork and apply and things like that too. So,
But isn't that, Todd, caused by the fact that you can't just do it the most efficient way? You can't just do it the best way. You've got to do it the legal way. And the
Or the
legal way
cheapest way.
means here's your hula hoops.
right.
Yeah.
Well-
I mean, here's the thing. I think that it makes it easy for some of us to understand when we call it a utility, right? It lumps it into, our gas and water bill, which we're all used to paying. We think it helps owners and operators put it into something that they grasp better of. But I think we do that at the expense of summoning a demon that we don't mean to. And
I'm sorry, I just pictured this
well
scene from
said.
The Exorcist. I'm sorry.
well, it's
No,
like
that's well
Beetlejuice,
said.
Summoning this demon.
Beetlejuice, right? And all of a sudden, bam,
Or Beetlejuice. There we go.
right? And then you've wrecked a profit center for some owners. I think you're gonna, I don't know.
No, I think that's well said. That's really, be careful of the intention and where it ultimately goes. And like I said, I mean, we're about spectrum. Whether it's in the air, whether it's light spectrum in the fiber, whether now you have Starlink, and it's like, man, it's really really hard to have your regulatory and politicians jump right in the middle of that and try and referee ultimately what's going to happen. And I think there's enough history to show that it's really not that great of an idea. And I will, kind of close it by saying, we have these are the customers. These are customers that I've had for 20 years. These are friends of mine. I know their families. You have the ones that really went for the money, the grant money, and then you do have a mindset, God bless it, that they're like, you know what? No, we're going to stay private. We're going to go ahead and grow this network the way that I want to grow it as a company and serve it the way that I serve the product out the way that I know how to serve it. I'm not going to take the grant money. And I got to tell you, the ones that are having the growth for 2023, which was a crazy contraction year in our industry, it was the contraction was meteoric. I mean, it was crazy. And those are the ones that have been consistently growing and consistently building, and consistently the ones that have really ultimately been delivering the product. So I just think that the utility is okay because I think the word is okay. It's a regulated utility. I think you have to add that word on there, and when you add that word on there, it's toxic.
But
isn't that kind of like putting? That's kind of like putting a substance in the water that acts like blood, smells like blood, and tastes like blood. But we're going to explain to the sharks that that's not blood, right?
That's a good analogy.
Because that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
If it's out there and it's used to it, Congress is going to go, wow.
Right, but culturally, you can't change the mindset of people thinking that the internet is a utility, right? Because a lot of times it's being supplied either by the electric company or the internet is supplied by, these people who are selling the utility. So lumping it there, I think, is a hard hill to climb to try and change the culture to have it not really think of it as a utility at this stage, in my opinion. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm not for it, but I think it would be difficult to have to change that mindset.
I think if you ask the consumer, if you ask the resident, because that's who we really should be talking to. And at the end of the day, I don't think they really care. I don't want to put words in their mouth, whether we call it a utility or not, as long as the service is there, the support is there, and they're not paying an arm and a leg for it. There's a very good return. And that, because really it's about about the consumer. It's like the electric. I forget. I think it was in Texas, and there was some. We're going back several years, and there was some big storm in Texas, and these people participated in some program in Texas, and then all of a sudden they saw their electric bill just quadruple or something. I forget the actual circumstances, but it was insane. And these poor people were just left hanging. So I look at it, whether it's labeled a utility or not, and I think the more we throw regulation on it, we have to be careful. But in my opinion, it really comes down to what does the consumer really care? Do they mind that it's called a utility or not? Because at the end of the day, I think they just want to make sure they're getting what they pay for.
And I think to your point, Todd,
right.
I think to your point, I think we're all saying the same thing, but I think to your point, to give them the experience that they're used to, I don't think they care what title it's giving, but the way it performs and how robust it is, how inexpensive it is, to your point, not referring it to a utility protects all of that. I think is what has been has been part of this conversation. I agree with everything you just said. The resident experience, they don't want to pay an arm and a leg for it. So to that end, I know if I had option, let's just say I'm a multifamily owner and I could choose from two different power companies. I can go to that power company and I can say, hey, who's going to bring in a circuit of electricity in here that's going to serve everybody? Great. Who's going to give me the best price? I build that into my NOI. I'm making an NOI on that as well. The residents happy because they're never paying more than retail or even promotional rates for that electricity, et cetera, et cetera. Oops, I'm sorry. We can't do that with electricity today because it is a utility. There is one person doing it. Now I can put in and choose Dojo Networks to bring my managed Wi-Fi provider. You got me the best price, everything else. I'm going to build it in. I can build it into my NOI. There is not Keith had asked the question, how does this affect the property ownership group? Well, you could say goodbye to having an NOI on that completely if it becomes a utility, in my opinion, right? Because they're not allowed to do that and everything else. We covered that a little bit. But I think that what we're able to do today is say, and I'll say this all seemed to, based on my research, referring it to utility came from one study and article, right? It was a combination of things. I believe it was Park Associates and NMHC. Both those organizations, forgive me if I'm incorrect, but I believe I had it on my separate screen here and it went black on me. It was a study that they did. They said 80%, and this is a few years ago, 80% of residents said that having internet is as important as having water. They didn't say that it's important as a utility, that it should be a utility. They said the internet and connectivity and reliable connectivity is as important to us as water. Because before that study had come out, before they had released that, there really wasn't a ton of people throwing around internet, the fourth utility, internet, the fifth utility, internet this. It was that study that, and every early marketing piece that I saw referred back to that study. So I believe that's where it started. I'll shut up there. Jeff, did you have, did a light bulb go off? I thought I saw you kind of.
No, I'm still struggling with the idea that someone would think that internet was more important than being able to flush their toilet or
as important.
You know,
it was
you
as
go to
important.
the gym to use the bathroom, Jeff.
Yeah. I'm not thinking large enough. I'm sorry.
Well, gang, listen, we're running out of time here. I know that I've got something coming up at 1:30 here. We went a little long on this. I don't care. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for coming and having this conversation with Keith and I. Both of you were perfect to have on this, and it's given us some more to chew on. So as we wrap things up here, I just want to go around and ask the direct question. Take 60 seconds or so if you need it. It's fine. Do we believe that we will come across a time where internet will absolutely be regulated and made a utility? Jeff, go. Do you believe that those days are ever ahead of us? Today, 50 years from now, I don't know.
We're already there. I think that the mindset is that people do think of it as a utility. And a bunch of fellas talking it over. I don't know how much will change, but I will. My vote would be I would push extreme caution on the regulation around that utility, and if you smother innovation in marketplace constructs, it could be more damaging than if you think you're going to do things. So I would say people mentally think of it as a utility, and if there could be some way to not have to regulate it to such a severe degree, it will net benefit for everyone.
Same question to you, Todd. Do you believe we're coming up on a time where it will be some form of government regulatory mandatory utility inside of residential and multifamily, urban environments or across the United States?
I think I agree with Jeff. I think we're already there. We've been there for a long time. I think the government, and it seems like, we're really talking heavily about the people in Washington, right? Especially in an election year, it's kind of interesting. But, I think the consumer has to make that decision. Do they want it to be that or not? And I keep going back to let the consumer decide. What we don't want is somebody in Washington making that decision for us. And a lot of times they do try to make that decision because they say, we know what's best for you, even
Right.
though we sit there kicking and screaming, saying, no, 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 we don't want it. Everything is fine the way it is. No, you're wrong, Matt, Keith, Jeff. Let me tell you what you need. So
Right.
it's the consumer that can end up suffering here or benefiting, depending on which way this thing goes.
Appreciate it. Keith, final thoughts on that. Do you believe we're going to be looking down a time 5 years from now, 50 years from now, where it's going to be a governmental regulated, product or service?
I've got two options to keep that from ever happening, though we're halfway down the road of it happening. The first is to educate the consumer and then ask them who they want looking after them, right? The government or a private entity. And then second, I guess, to Jeff's point, we're going to have to get with Taylor Swift and get her to stop referring to it, potentially give us a plug, and then we can change the culture of the young people today. And then, we'll be okay 20 years from now. But it's going to take some work because it's sure become a thing.
I think we need to ask Chat GPT too.
Oh
We
God,
probably do.
that's
Probably
another
do.
show.
Well,
Oh my Lord.
So Todd, if myself or Keith or anybody wanted to learn more about you, get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
LinkedIn. They can find me on LinkedIn just about every day, posting and talking about this topic and many other topics on LinkedIn. My contact information is there. If you don't have a pen and can write it down so fast, but todd.thorpe@dojonetworks.com. Our website, dojonetworks.com. Reach out to us. DM me on social media. Would love to talk.
Awesome stuff. Jeff, same question to you. We want to learn more about you, get a hold of you in the future. What's the best way we could do that?
LinkedIn's always good, and you can hit me at my name, jeff.mulqueen@technisolutions.com. I want to thank you guys for having sort of the forum open and trying to at least spice up LinkedIn a little bit. Then and we had a comment yesterday about how is LinkedIn is incredibly boring. So when I see your stuff come over, Matt, I'm like, all right, I'm in. I want to go ahead and check this out. So thank you very much for spicing up the social media for the corporate world. One thing I got to give a plug to our partner Blueport. They continue to do really incredible things, for innovation in the multifamily market, and we're thrilled that we're partners with them. We're also partners with Dojo, who are equally doing just incredible things, and that's a whole interesting area where innovation really has blossomed, and there's two incredible companies represented on this call, on this show. So, we're continuing to trying to find ways that we can make the whole manufacturing process, collapsing it to make it more streamlined, make it more accessible, generate products faster. The traditional way that people buy equipment, we're always trying to challenge that and extend a lower price, which ultimately will bring broadband to a lower price for the consumer, which I think is how this show was kind of directed towards. So thank you for inviting me to be on the show. I appreciate it.
We are truly honored and humbled to have you both on. I won't bore everybody else with outros for Keith and myself. We're not important anymore. But listen, again, I am going to end with this plug. Once again, this is going to be a 2-part conversation. We actually most recently, and I won't drop his name yet, but the leading attorney in the space and field, trusted by the multi-housing industry, has agreed to come on and do part 2 of this conversation with Keith and I. So we are really excited about that. Most of you that are in the industry, in the space, most likely know instinctively who I'm talking about. The guy who sits down with Washington and FCC regulations and has some stuff on this. He's going to come in and offer some viewpoints from his perspective and time in the industry. So it'll be really interesting to hear this I don't know if he's going to come on and offer a legal point of view, but at least his expertise of time in the field. So I don't want to give away anything he's going to give away, but so please, y'all, if you really enjoyed this, tune in for that conversation as well. But again, thank you guys. I have a studio fly in here bugging me like crazy, but we're good to go. And Jeff, Todd, Keith, again, thank you so much. Looking forward to the next conversation and the next trade show. I'll see you guys at, I'm sure.
Sure.
Thanks, guys.
Try and have some fun. Appreciate it, guys.
Awesome.
Appreciate everyone.
See you, boys.
All right.